All right, Ryan Risdal, man, I'm super excited to have you on here. Thanks for making the time to be on the Intentional Agribusiness Leader podcast with me today.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Looking forward to it.
So let's dive right in and give you the same question. Give you the big opening question. What does it mean for you to be intentional?
That's a that's a big question. I think in anything within when you're working with other individuals, I mean, you have to be first thing is you have to be present, and that is difficult to do in today's environment where you're always distracted by something dinging on your computer or your phone's buzzing or everything else. But I think you have to make people understand and believe that you care about them, um, and you're interested in who they are and what they do. I think that's probably how I view being intentional. And it sounds kind of crazy, but as a little kid, grew up on a farm. There's a gentleman by the name of Jim Penny who used to be the CEO of Heart Iowa Cooperative, which was my hometown co-op. And when I would go into the co-op with my dad, Jim would address me as a grown-up, and I was a little kid. It made me feel 10 foot tall and bulletproof, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
always stuck with me. So when I try and work with individuals, I try and make them feel the same. It's not easy, and I'm not successful 100% of the time at it. Probably not even 50% of the time, but in the back of my mind, that's what I use as a gauge for success. Um, what it takes to be intentional, because Jim was present 100% of the time and made you feel really good about it. Yeah,
Yeah. Such a great description, right? That presence
yeah,
and I often use that when we're talking about this with other people or people in training programs, right? Like, hey, everybody has that experience with somebody, an aunt, an uncle, a grandma, a parent, Jim
yeah,
from the co-op,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. Yeah, you
I
don't know who
remember
it's going to be, right? But everybody's got someone.
exactly. I remember the first I was on a sales road trip with my dad one summer. How one he was building up his business, and the waitress called me Little Sir, and that was that was the biggest day. My dad gave me grief about that the rest of his life. So,
You put that
so
on a t-shirt.
yeah, right, exactly. So, a lot of organizations in ag right now struggling with talent retention, Ryan, and just kind of curious what are you guys doing at ProAgrica, and you're part of that to be intentional about keeping good talent around.
Yeah, I think you need to be the organization needs to be absolutely clear on what it's trying to do, right? I think we've all worked in organizations where what we're trying to achieve is really fuzzy. In ag, whether it's ag retail, distribution, ag tech, I mean, ag is a intense business to be a part of. Burnout is common. If the individual does not understand the work they do, the extra hours they put in, the blood, sweat, and tears, if you will, if they don't understand how that contributes to the overall success in a tangible manner, right? It doesn't make it that emotional connection doesn't happen. And if you can't get the individual to emotionally connect to where you're trying to get to, what you're trying to do, and how they fit, what piece they are in the puzzle to make the picture, right? If they can't see that and they can't feel it and they can't see what they've done, like I worked on a Saturday last week, and because I did that, this person was able to do that, which enabled us to do this. If they can't tangibly pull that together, they're going to struggle to understand what the why am I doing this, why does this matter, why do I, and then when they get to the why do I care, you've already kind of lost them, right? So I think for me, ag is a burnout industry, and if you cannot at least insulate yourself from that by emotionally connecting the individual to the business,
Mm,
you're going to struggle, right? You're going to struggle. They have to be emotionally connected to the business, but as a leader, if they don't believe in you or have confidence that you have the best interest for them,
mm-hmm.
they're going to leave you as well. There's a huge amount of trust and belief, and I think that's important. I've been a part of, and I've watched organizations just burn people out and churn them out. The bottom 10% gets let go every year and rehire new people, and they feel that's the way to manage their organization. And I disagree with that wholeheartedly. I think good individuals that are bought in are the most important thing to the organization. They deliver the mail, they get the work done. without good people in a bought-in team, it's really hard to be successful. It's really hard to get
Mhm.
any kind of consistency in any relationships, any identity. You can do all the marketing you want, but if your team is not bought in, it's not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah, did you bring up the word? And I think this you might be the first one so far to bring up the correlation that it's an emotional
Yeah,
experience for the employee, right?
absolutely.
It's an emotional experience to decide. And I was talking to somebody else, I think, on another episode, and or maybe outside of the recording, but we were talking about seed and how emotional of a decision
Mhm.
buying seed is,
Yeah,
right? At the
what's
farm, at the
trust?
farm level, right?
It's deep. Oh, it's
Mm.
huge trust. Yeah,
And so what happens when that seed doesn't perform or doesn't get delivered or they can't get what they want?
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
If you can understand that,
yeah,
right, with the downside of that not going well, I think
yeah.
maybe as a leader we can understand like that employee, the employee mindset a little bit differently. And like, to me, being in part of being intentional is trying to put yourself in the shoes of others a little bit. You don't have to live there, but try to make decisions and with an understanding of how this is going to impact.
Yeah,
Doesn't mean you don't have to make tough decisions. Like, that's part of being a leader. Like, you're going to
yeah,
make decisions that people don't like. I get that.
yeah,
But can you do that with an empathetic or
yeah,
at least a compassionate?
yeah.
um
There's the old, really good friend of mine. His name is Doug Kaiser. He used to do training when I was at United Suppliers. He would do training for United Suppliers, and one of the things that he talked about with us was understanding yourself and others. It's a very common training, but it was very impactful to me when we talked about, you have two individuals climbing the ladder, and they're both going to get to the same height. And then one guy says, "Well, I see it this way," and the other person says, "Well, I see it that way." And they look at each other and go, "Well, how in the hell could you see it that way?" Right? My view was right. Early in my career, I was very aggressive, very, just punch through it, right? Just punch through it, don't care, just get it done. Once you start to see, as you said, Mark, once you start to appreciate someone else's perspective, and then you start to talk about to talk just start to talk about things so they can better absorb it and better process it and better understand it. Um, it just makes change easier. It makes conversations easier. It makes achieving things much better. But until you do that, man, you're going to struggle, right? You're going to struggle to implement change, and you're going to struggle to get a team to be emotional about it. And it's just, yeah, it's really powerful to be able to take a step back and be empathetic and take a look at it. And that took me the better part of 15 years to 20 years to learn, right? I mean,
yeah.
that is a big step in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, it's there's an author named John Eldridge who writes a book um, called Fathered by God, and he goes through the different stages that people go through
Yeah,
during their
yeah,
development. And often we find that young people early on in the career are in what they call the cowboy phase, which is like the
yeah,
yeehaw, get it done,
yep, yep,
like the get her done kind of
yep,
personality and just grind. Right.
yep,
And you can do that because you're young and there's less consequence to the body at that stage.
yep,
Maybe you don't have a full family, in place yet,
mhm,
and you can go, and
yeah,
there's a time and a place for that. And then the next phase is what's called the warrior phase. And in
yeah,
the warrior phase, right, is the build, the go. Like, you probably have a young family, you probably got something to
yep,
defend, right?
yeah,
Something you're starting to build for.
right,
But you still got a little bit of that cowboy. You still got, you haven't got that
yeah,
maturity, the wisdom that comes once you kind of turn 40. There's something biologically that happens, at least as from a male perspective. I know that there's something biologically that shifts. I
yeah,
think about the world differently.
yeah,
I'm starting to think about legacy, and we entered what's called the king phase in his work and in Eldridge's work. And so, there's a natural progression, I think, that people go through, that we go through in our career, like our
mhm.
30s, like a lot of people nobody would admit this, but I think it's a lot more about like, what can I build?
Oh,
Right.
sure,
Right.
yeah,
What can I build? How can I
absolutely,
prove myself? How can I, like, and then when we get into the 40s, the later stages of our career, and the kind of the last 20, say, let's call that the 40s and 50s.
yeah,
Well, now, yeah, and I'm sure plenty of people work till they're 70, but we'll just kind of put it into the box of the 40s and
right,
50s, right?
right,
Now it's like, well, what can I leave behind?
Yeah.
Now it's a different tone. So anyway, I think that plays in, and I think you're really relevant to, to understand this and talk about this, given the role that you're in. And
Mhm.
you're also working with a team. I mean, I think you told me like 150 people. I mean, around the world, like you're talking
Yeah.
almost every time zone.
Yeah. Literally every time zone. Yeah. Yeah.
And you really like when you talk about having to see it from someone else's perspective. Like, listen, if you live in Australia, I mean,
Yeah.
they literally might culturally see the world differently than we do.
Absolutely. Or if you talk
So,
to, a person from the Netherlands, they will address you differently and question you differently with a different emotional background. Then you might take it as offensive, but they're literally stating the facts.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the Dutch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just
So
take a deep breath and be like, okay, appreciate that.
yeah. So from a leadership perspective, then this is a little bit off script. I don't have this question written down, but I want
Yeah.
like how do you overcome those stories, that because it can be, I mean, I would imagine like you can have some train wrecks and people
Oh,
start,
yeah.
taking things personally,
Yeah.
even though the person just maybe operating or questioning like how they do in their culture,
Right.
but if you're really direct and abrupt and that's normal there, that's probably not normal in Ames, Iowa.
Oh, hell no. No, yeah, it's not.
So
No, it's not. It's not. It's difficult. It took, and that was part, I mean, that was part of getting used to and part of the challenge of this job is, being in an international position is that you have to be a bit vulnerable to understand, right? And you have to be willing, to ask the dumb question, to level set the conversation, right? Intentionally. Like, I don't know how many times I've said, look, so and so, I'm ignorant here. Help me understand. And I think help me understand are some of the most powerful words I've ever used. And I forget where I got that from. I'm sure I got it from somebody, but help me understand are some of the most powerful words that I continue to use every day, because if something catches me off guard like that, now that I'm gonna be 45 in October, so I'm in that phase of seeing the end, right? So
yeah.
I've after that 15-second initial blood pressure spike, and you're like, how could that person ask me that question, right? After you take a deep breath and pull yourself back from that.
Yeah.
All right, so and so, help me understand where you're coming from. I mean, I'm ignorant here. What do you mean by that? I mean, let's dig in and ask those probing questions. Then 30 seconds later, you're like, oh, absolutely, yeah, okay, now I understand where you're coming from, and you're fine. But I think I've I've been a part of relationships and watched organizations just bristle up and think they have to be tough, and
Mhm.
if you're a leader, you're going to be the tough guy and you're going to say all the tough things and ask all the hard questions and just pound your fist on the table, right? That doesn't work, in my opinion. I mean, there's a time and a place for that, right? But that is very, very, very infrequent. Very, very infrequent. Because what that does is it tells me that your relationship has broken down to the point where there is nothing left. And the only resort you have is to be the tough guy because you have to get something done to meet the bigger picture, which is a horrible place to be.
Yeah.
I find if I can be a bit vulnerable, because part of it is, I mean, unfortunately, when you have a job title and you're talking to someone else, they're going to be a bit intimidated because they don't know me very well. They don't understand what am I truly after in this conversation. I mean, put yourself in their shoes. I mean, they're a bit intimidated, maybe they're not. But if you can just, you know, level set the playing field, understand, hey, I'm curious, right? I just want to understand. I'm ignorant at the moment. Can you help educate me? And once they start explaining to you and start teaching to you, then it's like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes absolute sense. Let me try and help you out. And if you do it and follow up, I think even beyond, there have been a few relationships I've struggled with, but we've gotten to some really good places over time. Some of them are quick, some of them take time. It depends on how much stuff you're working with that happened in the past, but I feel like our team now is working really well together. We're not perfect, but we're a heck of a lot better than we were 2, 3 years ago. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. it takes a minute to get things to get everybody pulling in the same direction, and you have to be
Yeah.
intentional about that, obviously. So from a cultural standpoint, you've got many cultures blending
Yeah.
into one culture, which is the culture of your company, your team, your
Mhm.
organization. So what challenges have you had in getting everybody to kind of pull together in the culture, right? Because I mean, a lot of people talk about culture. I think culture needs to be intentionally created. It's not something. I mean, if you it will, otherwise it will happen accidentally.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just curious what have you had to overcome, or how have you worked to intentionally build that?
Yeah. Um, I always say culture trumps strategy every time, and culture happens whether or not you want it to, or you, and despite your best interests, there's a culture that
Mm-hmm.
will emerge. Um, I think for us and for my past, if you're if you're able as a leader to be intentional, and if you're able for people to, if you're able to start building trust and build trust or not take away trust, right? Often people trust immediately, but it gets taken away. Um, if you're able to build trust and respect and be intentional and be present, if people trust you, they will go along for the ride. And if you can clearly articulate what you're trying to do, where you're trying to go, what their place is, and they fundamentally trust you to get them there and to take care of them, we're a huge company. And there's always a bit of nervousness of working in a large organization. If your team fundamentally believes that this individual will do what's right, I'm okay with that. And I will sign up for that. And I will change, and I will let my guard down, and I will drink the proverbial Kool-Aid, right? I will do that, and I will submit to what they're trying to do and accomplish. But if if they don't trust you, if they don't respect you, if there's been broken trust in the past, it's really hard to build a culture, because there's an element of you got to let your guard down to accept a culture or be part of a culture, I think. And I think I'm saying a lot of the same stuff, but I think just that fundamental relationship, and that being available to be present and being vulnerable to just you have to, I feel as a leader, you have to be strong, but you've got to be vulnerable at the same time. You've got to be confident. Look, here's where we're trying to go. Here's what we're trying to do. This is how we're going to get there. And this is your role in that. And I need you to be there for us,
Yep.
because it's about us. It's not about, it is about you, but it's about us, right?
Yep.
And you're part in that. And I mean, Mark, that's taken me, again, a long, long time. And I've failed at building culture before, and I've not done it exactly right, but I've never done it the same. But each time I've been in an organization and tried to help them do something, you've got to understand where you're at before. You can't walk in with a script and be like, okay, day one, you're going to stand up in front of the group and be like, this is, you can't read it. You got to be able to connect with people and understand the ebbs and flows of what they've been through, and then understand what the company's trying to do, and then you got to mash them together. Um, it's
Right.
kind of a learned art, and you just got to be focused on the people to make it happen, I feel.
Mm-hmm. So here's what something that's interesting, as I'm listening to you twice now, this has come up, the word clarity, right?
Mhm.
The word clarity, both in just understanding, the team and the people where they're at, but then also being able to lead with clarity and
Right.
clearly articulate. And I think that's a direct quote, to clearly articulate the direction. And I think that's
Right.
what a lot of people are just craving, right? They're just
Yeah.
craving clear direction. Where are we going?
Yeah.
Why does this matter?
Yeah.
What is this leading us to? Right. I mean, and just like, but overall, where are we going?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
if you just went macro, take it out of our company's perspectives for a moment, and like look at what's going on in America. I mean, if we had a clear direction for where we're going,
Absolutely.
what a difference that would make. But you have such a fragmented and
Yeah.
fractured view. There's no true leadership that says, hey, clearly this is what we're creating as a nation. And then so now you
Yeah.
see the result of not having that.
And the loss of the ability for individuals to have a different opinion and have a constructive debate, that to
Great
me
point. Yeah.
that to me is, I'm completely okay if somebody has a different opinion than me. And if it's strong opinion, great. But if that individual can't sit down and talk to me and have a dialogue and both shared perspectives, right? That's where I struggle. And I start to ask myself, is this individual able to be part of a team? Or are they so focused on their belief that they can't adapt and at least respect someone else's position and the position that, because there's always common ground. And my fear is that we're losing that ability for individuals to sit down and have a constructive conversation about how they do not believe the same thing, but at least come to an agreement at the end that, yeah, we don't believe the same thing, but today this is the best thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think that to me is the most concerning thing. Um, and I do see that in business, but yeah, certainly in the private in the US today, that does concern me, but that's a different conversation for a different day. But
Right.
I do see that trickling into business. But so far we've had a really good,
Yeah. Well,
we
I think
haven't had
the macro experience is something that's lived for all of us. So
yeah,
we all see that and are frustrated by that.
yeah,
If you have the ability to actually recognize that there are multiple different viewpoints across so
yeah,
many cultures within our country, and so and I mean, at least from our generation and upward, like, you remember a time when debate was welcomed and
yeah.
we could
It
have a
was
conversation. We could
celebrated, yeah,
disagree with each other. We don't even have to like adopt each other's beliefs. I certainly don't have to start
yeah,
living your lifestyle.
yeah,
And it
yeah,
was okay. Like, all right,
yeah.
well, guy's a little weird, but let him,
That's cool.
good
It
for
was
him. At least
okay.
now I understand him better. I can
Yeah,
see. And that was, like, I went through some diversity training in the late 90s through the FFA, actually, and,
oh
as part
cool.
of FFA leadership. And it
Yeah,
helped me understand. Like, I think one thing that I had to do was, it was on this committee, and so we had to be on this committee. We had to go through diversity training, and they gave us like a stack of beads of all different colors, and then they asked us all kinds of questions about,
yeah,
like, the types of people that were in our life growing up. And
yeah.
so they asked us, I don't know, 20 questions, and pretty soon I've got um, a string of beads, sitting here in front of me with 19 white ones and, one brown one, right? Like, oh yeah, maybe I don't understand other cultures, right? As much as, my dad taught me sitting at the kitchen table about how everybody is, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well,
um,
you weren't exposed to it. I wasn't either
we
as
weren't, no,
growing
not
up
growing up in
yeah,
rural
in a small
Minnesota. I
town.
mean, you just weren't. But and now I am. Now I don't have an excuse. Now I have an obligation as a leader, and especially as an intentional leader, to do my best to understand and help other people understand. And one last thing on this, I was watching an RFK Jr. interview.
Mm.
Uh, Somewhere, because I've just been following, we're kind of getting into the next presidential cycle here and just checking out
Mhm.
the different candidates. And he said something really interesting, that his dad, obviously before he was assassinated, but his dad would force them at the dinner table to choose. They would have to choose like a topic, like a social or a political topic of the day,
Okay.
and take a different side and debate it
Oh
at
yeah.
dinner.
Yeah.
And like, how cool! Like, we don't teach kids how to debate
Yeah.
properly, like we
Yeah.
don't teach our kids to, like, I mean, they'll fight, of course, right, over who gets what, but
Absolutely.
um
Yeah.
to actually, like, give them the skill sets to sit down and debate, like, that's intentional leadership, right? Like,
Yeah.
giving your people the skill sets to do it, and then have to, like, maybe debate a side that you don't like, that you don't agree with, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I think there's something to be said about intentionally infusing those kind of things into
Yeah.
business culture and so on. So
Yeah.
Ryan, talk to me a little bit about, what's been a big hurdle that you have had to overcome as a leader over the course of your career.
Oh, I think, I mean, it's consistent here with our conversation, but I think the biggest hurdle I've had to overcome is building cultures. And like I said,
Mm-hmm.
I've not always it we've always gotten to a place, and it's always been a better place than where we started. The journey there wasn't always smooth, and I don't think it probably ever can be. um I just, if you don't have what I would call a healthy team, and a team that can communicate openly and is working efficiently and is focused on what you're trying to achieve, then I mean, that is the biggest hurdle. I think too, getting buy-in from leadership above you that,
Mm.
hey, look, I'm going to come into your organization and this is what I see, and this is what I'm going to do over the next 2 years in order next year, 2 years to get us where we need to get to be successful, right? And sometimes at the moment when they sign up for that, they're all about it. But you get 6 months into it, you start looking at financials, and you're like, man, this change needs to happen faster. And my comment back is, there's only so much emotional change a person can withstand. I've got my hand on the clutch here, and I'm pushing it as far as I can without burning people out or losing the best people, right? And that's within that, taking a little different angle on the culture topic. That is one of the bigger hurdles that a leader has to deal with when it comes to, I mean, as I see it, culture, the biggest issue is when you're trying to be successful and you're trying to get your team there, almost managing the leadership above you, whether it be a board or the CEO or whomever, to stick with you for that time, because there always comes a time when you're building a culture where it gets rough. It gets really rough. Where the old adage, when everybody says who wants to change and everybody raises their hand, and then, or who wants change, everybody raises their hand, and I'll say who's going to change, and nobody raises their hand, right? I mean, so
Right.
it's it's difficult. You will find yourself in that place, and sometimes you get through it. I mean, you're able to continually sell yourself and in the group and what's going to happen, and you get the little base hits you can refer to and more common, more frequent ones. But man, there's sometimes where it's just you're under pressure, and it just doesn't always go as planned. But
Mhm.
you got to be
Well,
ready for that as a leader.
I'm sure I've said it more than 5 times since we started making this podcast, but it always rings true as you go through any team development, any change, right? The team has to go through the 4 stages, which are the forming, where we come together, and then we have to go through the storming, and then the norming, and then the performing. And I think that was Lencioni. I can't remember exactly which book that's out of. It's been so long, and I've used it so much over the years. But if we skip the storming phase, then we never truly get to the norming. We'll always have to come back and repeat. It will never feel good, right?
Right.
So we almost like, if you, I equate it to like, a lot of people became best friends with their third grade worst enemy. Right? Like you became really, like in high school, whatever, you guys were captains of the football team together, but in third grade, you couldn't stand each other.
Oh,
And
that's great.
right. So we have to go through those storming phases in
Yeah.
life in order to get to the norming and then to the performing. Every relationship goes through it. Like, don't try to skip it. You can literally be intentional almost and say,
Yeah.
hey, like how quickly can we get there? Right, and work through the storm so that we can get to the next level. Because what I think a lot of cultures do, a lot of leaders do unintentionally, is they skip the storm. They try to avoid the storm because it's tough, it's hard, it's not fun. Nobody likes that. I mean, if you've ever had to have a long conversation with your wife at night, and you're up till midnight working it through, like nobody, it's
Yeah.
never fun, but it's
No.
necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What's been a big win for you? What's been your biggest win as a leader, if you could pick one out of the hat?
I think the biggest win for me is seeing the results, right? So whether it be the individual developing themselves, or building a relationship with the individual, or seeing the sales numbers increase, or seeing the non-sales metrics start to actually tick, and you can see relationships form when you see efficiency start to come into the business, when you see customers start to come in and give you praises for your teams. Like, this individual came out to see me, and oh my gosh, I'd never had a better experience with a salesperson, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
when the products start to actually hit the market and people look at it and go, wow, this is really, really good, right? I think, to me, the biggest win is the base hits. If that sounds a little
Mm-hmm.
sounds a little weird, but for me, it's the biggest wins for me are multiple ones, and they're the base hits, because the home runs, if you're swinging for home runs all the time, there's gonna be a lot of collateral damage left behind your swing, right? So I think for me, it's a little base hits,
Yeah.
right? It's the team working well together, and you can see it and you can measure it, the relationships are happening and your competitors are coming to you and saying, wow, you guys are doing great. We're getting a little nervous. I'm like, yeah, cool. Right. I mean, that makes me feel good. Right. Or a team member says, I was ready to quit 2, 3 years ago and now I'm feeling pretty good. When you hear that, that means something's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful. I love it. I love the base hits. I love just when it comes to seeing someone on the team excel,
Yeah.
right? There's a job that, that you could step in and do, but the value to you and to the company to see them take that on and own it expands the company's capacity, builds their confidence, gives you greater certainty in your team. And it's just like, that's, to me, that's the stuff that feels really good. Like when our programs that we run, there was a time and I wrote them. there's a
Yeah.
there was a time and a place where only I could step in front of the classroom and teach,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Because I was, I knew the curriculum, I had the teaching style down, and that's what customers liked, and so we thought, well, it had to be him.
Mhm.
And then I was like, well, I think in 2019, pre-COVID, we ran 33 live events in 1 year,
Ooh,
and 33 2-day live events. And we had, thank goodness, like in 2017 or 16 and 17, we'd been building other facilitators to step in and take that up. It took time to get there, but now all of a
right.
sudden I could sit in the back of the classroom and I could see something that once only I could do,
Yeah.
that somebody who previously didn't even have the ability is now doing.
Oh, no.
And that's
Yeah.
like, leadership
Yeah.
standpoint,
Huge.
like, I'll get out
Huge.
of bed early for that.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think I think too, and it's along those lines. If you're not able to, if you're not focused on, like if you're not focused on your people, right, developing them and empowering them and getting them to do these things and think critically and answer tough questions themselves. If you don't have that trust with your team, right, and you don't develop that, right, you're gonna stay in the same place, to your point. I think
Mhm.
too, for me, it's like creating an environment where everybody understands what's going on, right? Back to that. But it becomes predictable and
Yeah.
you can plan on it, right? And it almost becomes a little bit boring because you can expect what's going to happen. And the things that pop up like aren't huge things, but that gives you time as a leader to start addressing the other stuff. And it gives you time as a leader to recognize and celebrate the wins because at that point, everybody's ready to receive the wins because they're feeling good. If,
Hmm.
if, if stuff is chaotic and people are in a bad mood and you try and celebrate wins without addressing the situation, they're like, who's this corporate guy up here talking to me about these wins that they have no idea what's going on, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
But if you're plugged in and you're addressing them and things become boring and you're like, hey, this month we did this and this person did that and this is awesome and good job. Everybody's like, well, yeah, everything's kind of clicking, everything's kind of moving along, right? And if you can get to that point, and this is more the authenticity piece, right? But you have to delegate and empower and develop people to get to that point. That's part of that whole storming and stuff you were talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. We got to go through the phases. All right.
Yep.
So, I mean, it all sounds good in theory, right? And then
Oh
as a
yeah.
leader, it comes down to like, well, how do I allocate my time? Right.
Yeah.
Because everybody seems to want a piece of it. I've got more than enough to do. There's nobody listening to this podcast that doesn't have 18 more things on their list to do today that, then is going to get done. And that's going to,
Right.
turn into potentially stress and other things and burnout. So
Absolutely.
talk to me, what's your take on this? Like, how do you allocate your time? Right. Because we're talking about some nice things like building your team and investing in building up people. Right. But then you got admin stuff. Let's be honest. You got emails and stuff to respond to. Right. I mean, you got a lot
Yep.
of overhead tasks.
Yep.
I call them overhead tasks that just like, reduce the amount of time that I have to go do maybe some other more important things throughout the day.
Right.
How do you kind of allocate your time for maximum productivity, at least in your world?
So I mean, being an international organization, I reserve the first part of the mornings for the European group, right? Because they're up 6 hours before we are. So I try and block my day, just segments, right? And it depends on the day, whether it's, typically it's 3 blocks. First block is for because I've got 5 to 6 hours of incoming questions every morning that while I'm sleeping.
Mm.
So I allocate the first part of my morning just to digest that and respond to anything that needs an immediate response. Because me first, I'm an introvert that needs to act like an extrovert. as you can, I mean, the amount of emotional energy that I have to put out every day is pretty substantial. So I have to process that to be comfortable to go through the rest of my day. And I recognize that. So I might not respond to everything, but I at least know what's there. And then I have a pretty religious schedule throughout the day. I try and block off the time period where the kids get on the bus, right? Because I just need that to be that person. Doesn't always work out, but I'm batting about 70% there. And then I'm very intentional what I show up for and what I don't show up for, because I want my immediate direct reports that are basically running the individual businesses to make decisions. If I show up to every meeting and answer every question, that doesn't happen. So I'm very, very intentional what meetings I accept and what meetings I hit tentative and watch the recording on, and what meetings I flat out decline. So I purposefully have a gauge of what I accept based on the decision that I anticipate needs to be made in that meeting and who in that meeting has decision rights. And I blatantly hit decline if I know that the individual is in the room. I trust them to make the right decision. I do not need to be there, right? So I really protect my time in that late morning, early afternoon to the things that I have to do, because I've gotten to the point where I trust my team and they're completely capable of doing what they need to do, and I don't have to be there. But that's the time where I do a lot of the just keeping up with the business and getting some of the busy work done in that middle part of the day. Later part of the day, I've got reserved for like the Australians and everybody else is on the other side of the world, right? I mean, periodically visiting with them. And that's really quiet time. So that's time where I think about and do any of the leftover stuff and any of the longer term thinking, like, are we tracking to where we're trying to get to? Does everybody feel like they're being communicated to? I mean, all those other bigger level things, I try and do that. Now, that sounds awesome, but some days it works and some days it doesn't. But I think the biggest thing, how I try and be productive is intentionally decide what I do and do not show up to, because my presence has an influence on who makes decisions or who asks questions to whom. And I trust the people that I have, and I don't need to be there. And kind of the running joke at ProAgrica is I'm very open about being an introvert and having to be an extrovert. I need alone time to recharge. Maybe it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever I got, but I do set aside at least 15 minutes a day just to be quiet, just to reset myself. Because if I don't, I start to get run down and kind of crabby. And everybody, if you show up and you're not in a good mood, it completely blows up everybody else, right? I mean, why is Ryan in a bad mood? What's going on? I mean, their brain just starts racing, which it shouldn't. But yeah, you have to recognize that if the way you show up and the energy that you give out is very important. So if I'm feeling tired and run down, I might be 5 minutes late to a meeting, but it's because I'm sitting in my chair, just collecting myself, getting calm, and then I can show up and be myself again. So.
Well, I think that's a really good rundown. And, one of the things I'm hearing, just again and again is really, I mean, protecting your time, being intentional about where you place your time, where you place your energy, trusting your team,
Yep.
And if you're a leader who's listening to this, that's like really struggling to trust others on your team to get things done.
It's tough.
My encouragement always is to, I mean, take a deep look inside, right? And say, okay, well, where am I maybe holding on to something a little bit too much? Where do I feel like I have to keep injecting myself into this? Am I not just letting people run? Am I not clear? And we talked about this in the beginning. Am I not clear on expectations? Am I not clear on the direction? And sometimes just because we think we are doesn't mean that they're perceiving it
Yeah.
as clarity too. So I'm always really cautious. Like, am I doing a good enough job of setting the expectations and double checking that? So yeah.
There's the help me understand, right? But there's also the, Mark, I need you to do this because it means this. And I've set all of my team down, like, I need you to do this because it means this to the business, it means this to everyone. And one, they need to see you be a leader. And number two, I need you to understand your business and run your business because you understand it or deeper in it than I am. And if I always tell them, if you look at me to make a decision,
Mm-hmm.
I'm probably going to make the wrong decision, right? Because I'll sit and listen to you. And, if you're struggling with a decision, come to me and we'll talk about it and you can tell me what's going on. I mean, I understand what's going on, right? I'm not completely aloof, but I understand what's going on. I understand what's happening, but I need you to come explain to me how you are within this. And then we will talk about it and then you will make the decision, but I will help you, right? But that's, I mean, again, it took a good 15 years plus for me to learn that, to be comfortable with that. So yeah, I understand if you're a leader struggling with delegation and trusting your team and everything else, one, you got to look at, is your mission, what crusade you're on, is it clear enough to everyone else?
Mm-hmm.
You have the right people working for you. Can you trust them? And if you can't, you've got some things you need to work through.
Yep, absolutely. All right, last couple of questions. Bring it in here for a landing,
Yeah.
Ryan. First one, what's a big thing that you get to improve on this year in yourself or your business?
Um, I think there's one thing I've learned in ag, whether it be in retail, distribution, or ag tech, is the minute you got it figured out, you're the guy that's over in the corner preaching and very few people are listening to you because you don't. So I think for me, it's just keeping the curiosity alive, and that gets difficult. I think keeping the energy up is tough. This is a demanding business.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me, it's just continuing to show up and be present, be relevant, be connected, keeping everything simplified. I think the things I think those are the things I'm working on. I just you can never stop. You can never be satisfied. You always got to be curious. You've got to be learning because things do change and
Mm-hmm.
change is a constant. So I think being flexible, being open, um, kind of rolling with it with what you get, right? I mean, it's a never ending battle for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you do to keep your energy up throughout the day?
Yeah, like I said, I take 5-10 minutes just to be quiet, turn my phone off, shut my computer, and just sit in my chair, um, and either stare out the window or close my eyes and just wait. It takes about 5-10 minutes before your brain slows down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that gives me enough energy to get through the day. What I do, and I haven't done this year, and I can feel it, is usually once a year I go I go hiking, I go backcountry backpacking. I usually go to Colorado and I try and get out for at least 4 to 5 days. Phone
Yeah.
doesn't work. I have to force myself to be alone, to decouple. And that helps center me back to who I am and what's most important. I find that if I don't do my daily chill out time, or if I don't do my yearly kind of recharge, I can feel it. And just the pace and it just all starts to kind of build up. And I think if you're not self-aware of all the stimulation that you have coming at you, and if you can't manage that will eat you up. So I think that's another thing took me 20 years to realize, right? Is I need to be cognizant of that and filter what's coming at me and be intentional of where I spend my time, and that, because it will make you unhealthy if you let it get the best of you.
Yeah,
So
for sure. Well, I love the idea of little backcountry backpacking, just
oh
the
great.
disconnect, the alone time. But
Yeah.
and I also love the daily. We actually teach this in some of our training events where we just take people into basically just like a 3-minute meditation to kind of get their focus back, right? And it's all focused on breathing, like just, we walk them through what that looks like. And I think that can be a huge benefit to just keeping focus and energy moving in the right direction during the day. Let's see, any book that or podcast that people ought to be listening to or reading.
Um, I always, I always enjoy, and so Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed that book, and he's got several podcasts that he's done since then. But I just always appreciate his ability to clarify messaging and ask questions and have a simple, it's just a simple approach, right, to how you message. Also, there's Chip and Dan Heath did the Made to Stick book, which is
Yeah, that's a great one.
I love that book as well. So I think, but probably what I will say is read and listen to as much as you can. I think when I first started out of college and you'd go to a training, it was like, oh my gosh, I have to do everything exactly like is in the book or in the training, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is you just need to pay attention and be present. But you'll take one or two things out of each experience to kind of build you as a person and build you as a leader and build you as a as an individual, right? I think if you try and do the script, it's going to be really challenging. But if you can find different things that you can pick up and be like, okay, yeah, if I would have done it this way using that might have had a different result. So I think, yeah, just do as much as you can, but always be ingesting information.
Yeah, absolutely. I could not agree more. Well, Ryan, this has been fantastic. Thanks for
Yeah,
making the time to be on here. I know you got people all over the world that need your time and attention today, so I definitely appreciate that
yeah,
you're taking the time to share some of your wisdom on this topic and dive in and just have a conversation around it. So appreciate you being on, man.
yeah. Thanks for having me.
You got any great way that if people want to look up, learn more about the company, learn more about you, what's the best way to reach out?
Yeah, you can look at the website. It's proagrica.com, or you can look, I'm on LinkedIn. I don't really do much other social stuff, so LinkedIn is the best place to find me. So,
Perfect. All right. Sounds good. We'll see you there.
all right, thanks.